Thank you, Dr. Williams. Really appreciate the intro. My name is David Burns, Director of STEM Innovation Networks. I am here with Kelly Geyer Evans.
Hi.
We are sitting in Columbus, Ohio, and we hope wherever you are, it's at least 10 degrees warmer. We're sitting at 17 degrees, and we're just not mentally nor physically ready or prepared for this.
It's cold.
Yes, thank you. Battelle, very interesting organization. We are the world's largest research and development company that's a nonprofit. We are mostly known throughout the United States as managing the national labs. We do things, security, healthcare, energy. Both Kelly and I work for a small group called Battelle Education, and we are the inside operation. We like to refer to Battelle two ways. One is Big Battelle, they run the national labs, and Little Battelle, we work primarily for what's on your screen, for the purpose of education, to basically benefit mankind. And what was interesting for us is we started through a will of a gentleman named Gordon Battelle. He actually wrote the will in 1921, and the building we're sitting in was built in 1929. The whole idea, he was a metallurgist. Part of the idea was to reinvent and take the proceeds of what was done in the commerce and put it back into education, making sure that men and women benefited through society. And that's what Battelle does, as it's kind of its DNA, and that's what Kelly and I do. We like to think every day of our lives. We started literally in the hardcore education business in 2006. We started one school. It was Metro Early College High School. Here's a young man, Ronnie Opong. He was one of the inaugural class. His notion here is, if it were my decision, STEM would be part of school every day. We'll come back and visit him. Metro, established in 2006. We advocate that most STEM schools, if not all, at least any that we work with, are inclusive, meaning you cannot attend one of our schools based on tests. We do a lot of interviewing around desire and ambition in the STEM fields, but not necessarily around academic ability. Metro's done very well. It's got a 100% graduation rate. Got some nice stats there. The kids do pretty well, specifically on the ACTs and the SATs. Not only do we say that, but there was a study commissioned, Dr. Sharon Lynch from George Washington University. She had an NSF grant to look at what inclusive STEM schools did. Metro was one of the participants within the studies. We found kids have stronger STEM career interest, have higher aspirations for college, and have higher GPAs and test scores. Those are nice statistics, but the real result of the inclusive STEM schools is more kids pursue STEM degrees in post-secondary education than your typical high school student. I think at Metro, the number of students to graduate, and I should say it's 50-50 women to men, the number of graduate, 44% of them pursue STEM degrees, where the national average is about 14%. As Dr. Williams was talking about, there's a lot of ways to define what STEM education is. And we've been butting up against the definition of STEM since we've started. So some people, it's very pillared: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We look at it a little bit differently. We think it's strategies that engage minds. This is a different approach, but it's more of getting the kids up, active, problem solving, doing design challenges, critical thinking, and what we have found is this appeals to a different kind of kid. The picture is of Jack McClintock. So one of the notions here is, are we just preparing the next generation of scientists do we have little kids running around in lab coats? And Jack's a pretty good example. He's got a film business, so he's way into the arts, And as Dr. Williams mentioned, there's always a push. When you encourage for a STEM education, there is a side that always says that must mean you are discouraging the arts. That's not true, or at least in our view, it's not true. You cannot have a good STEM program unless arts are integrated throughout. After our one school, we started something called the Ohio STEM Learning Network. That has continued to today. The slide says 11 schools, but here in 2017, we have over 40 STEM schools throughout the state of Ohio. We did the same model in Tennessee, the Tennessee STEM Innovation Network. Currently, that network started in 2010, and currently they have over 20 schools. We also operate something called STEMx. That has 21 states that participate. It's really around policy and advocacy. Long way of saying we've got a long vested interest in STEM education, but we also have a long running problem. We find high quality STEM programs can be found in urban areas. We are not finding them in the rural areas, or at least we're not aware of we see bits and pieces, but it's really, it's a problem in Ohio, it's a problem in Tennessee, and honestly, it's a problem nationally. Our model here in Ohio and Tennessee depends on a post-secondary institution and a business and a K-12 district working together. That's just hard to find in a rural environment. Should note one of the other endeavors that we do for STEM is we manage a network called the AEOP, Army Education Outreach Program. We work with a consortium of partners to provide high-quality STEM programming throughout the United States. We like to have a lot of dots on the map, and the AEOP program allows us to have far greater reach than we would with just our two states. This is Ronnie, who we introduced a little bit earlier. I think both he and Jack, when they talk about their experience in a STEM school, they never ever talk about, man, that was the best calculus class I've ever had in my life, or that was the most wonderful biology teacher I ever know. What they do teach about, or what they do speak about, is the culture of the school, how they were engaged, how they had to problem solve, how they had to critically think, and how those skills actually translated into their normal life. So looking at STEM, long way of saying Patel's had a big interest in STEM. We're working Ohio, Tennessee, nationally. But how does that actually translate into a rural context? With that, Kelly.
Thank you, David. So as David mentioned, our work here at Patel really grew from that one small school metro into a larger national network. And so when we think about zooming into like what does that look like to educators inside this network, we wanted to share some of the work taking place inside the rural areas within the networks. So here in Ohio, we have Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton. We have many larger cities, but we also are surrounded by large agriculture communities. So when we look at some of the work taking place at Metro, we get a lot of partners very interested in how do we make this happen in other schools and other systems across Ohio and across the country. One of our partners, the Literacy Design Collaborative, was really working to find additional ways to embed literacy inside science classes in real, authentic ways. And so we started with a pilot at Metro, but very quickly we're saying, okay, we know Metro looks different, it feels different. So what does this look like inside a rural context? Being a part of the Ohio STEM Learning Network, we were able to go out to the different STEM schools across Ohio and ask some of the rural STEM schools if they were interested in participating. One of the lessons very early on that we learned is in any of the STEM schools across the network, it's important that they bring in their local environment. When David's talking about the partnership between the university, the business, and the school system, that looks very, very different in a rural environment than it does here in Columbus. So when we invited them to come and talk to some of the teachers participating in this work here in Columbus, we then sat down and had a conversation about, is this something that you were interested in? What are some of the unique characteristics about your school? And some of the first things that we learned, going back to Heidi's conversation about, you know, what are some of the careers that are that you see in rural environments. And so very quickly it moved from not just the science classroom, but we need to make sure that we're incorporating our ag teachers. One of the things the superintendent said immediately was, you know, our science teachers don't have anyone else to talk to. Every day they're in classrooms by themselves. They don't have another teacher teaching biology, teaching physics, teaching chemistry. So can we think about including other schools which are still close by and really working on building those relationships? So as we took the success that we had in an urban environment and began thinking and exploring what it would look like inside the rural environment, we brought together 5 different school districts that weren't necessarily in the same county, because just because they were in the same county didn't mean that they were close to each other. And so we look at 5 districts across 3 different counties, but that are closer together than maybe some of the schools that are on the other side of the same county. We were able to still pull in some of our professionals here at Battelle, our researchers, our engineers, to come and meet with the teachers during that first year. One of the important things to note in terms of the structures, we talked about the 5 districts involved. We also knew that we could come in and bring some of the teachers and educators that were doing this work at Metro to lead and teach about the method and talk about what they've seen in their classroom, but that we wouldn't be able to connect those teachers inside the everyday classroom, you know, Monday through Friday. And so there were, we found another partner that was already inside some of those classrooms, inside some of those schools, and we were able to bring them into the training. That way they were able to provide some of that day-to-day in the classroom support. Another partner in this project was the PAST Foundation. We don't do evaluation, and so we were able to pull them in to be a evaluator of the project, and we're still waiting. We're in year 2 of this work, so we're still conducting that evaluation.
Just a question: you have people in the classroom working with the teachers hand on hand. From an outsider's view, that wouldn't be too sustainable. Do you try to get the training down?
Yeah, so, and that actually leads right into the next point. So with as we're in year 2 right now, year 1, we pulled in teachers and educators from Metro who were using the work. Now, that was with a cohort of 15 teachers across those 5 districts. This year, they identified additional science teachers within those 5 districts, moved down a little bit more into the 5th grade, and the teachers that participated in year 1 were really pushing to become the experts. In terms of sustainability, it's really important that you develop that expertise locally so that they're able to have those peer-to-peer relationships with cohort 2. The other piece that we noticed is inside, you know, everybody thinks it's unique, rural, suburban, urban, but it's easy to come into a school and say, like, your kids can do this. It's a very different thing when you're sitting down with a teacher across the hall and you're looking at student work and saying, oh, our kids can do this. And so buy-in just completely changes. The project itself was around, like I said, embedding literacy into science, and so the school district also said we really are focusing on design, the STEM school, and then we want to make sure that we're getting this design out to the schools in our surrounding area as well. So here you see an example from the 5th grade classroom of the kind of the reading, the research. They're doing testing and collecting data, but then being able to write about their experience. And so we learned a lot from year 1. We've made a lot of adaptations based on the feedback, ongoing feedback from the teachers. In year 2, I think the really important lessons are that the teachers have seen that kids are incredibly engaged and that they're seeing the level of the writing that kids are producing go up while learning the discipline. So this is one example. There are many other examples of what this looks like, but I think the key lessons are really listening to the district, learning about their specific needs, making sure that they are in on the planning from day one, and that you have ongoing meetings reflecting and listening to the key stakeholders throughout, and that you're finding a way quickly to help build the expertise. That way it's not always feasible for us to be there all the time, especially in large states where the rural communities could be hours or flights away. Thank you for letting us share. We're happy to answer any questions as we get to the Q&A portion.